Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to talk about astrology and the death of Selena Quintanilla. Um, she was a famous singer, and I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on this death. It was many years ago when she was murdered tragically. It was back in 1995, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about her murder and based on some natal placements and some transits she had. Well, the one thing that I noticed when she, as far as her murder goes, and I'm looking at like her natal. Talk about her natal chart first. Now, in her natal chart, she has Virgo on her eighth house cusp, and the eighth house is connected with death, and of course the eighth house could be associated with murder. Someone with the sun in Virgo actually murdered her, and the thing about it is, and also by degree, the person that murdered her, this, or at least, person at least accused of the murder, I believe did murder this person. She can vehemently deny it, but anyway, name of that person, Yolanda Saldivar. And the thing about that is, again, Virgo is on her eighth house cusp in her natal chart for Selena. And she also, at the time, she had transit Chiron in Virgo very close to that eighth house cusp. Now, it was interesting. Chiron could be about wounds and suffering. And when you talk about Virgo energy, of course, can be connected with frugality. And the thing about that is, there was obviously some suffering in connection with shared resources at the time. This person that Selena had really apparently had entrusted very strongly wound up embezzling money from, it's supposed to be from fans, and there was supposed the fans had paid for some memberships and fees, and they weren't getting compensated. They weren't getting anything in return, and there was a lot of money evidently that was embezzled by this person that Selena had strongly entrusted. Now, another thing, in Selena's natal chart, she also has Pluto in Virgo in her eighth house. And it's interesting that this was a Virgo that caused somebody that was involved in her shared resources that caused her death. And she also has the black, interestingly enough, the black moon Lilith in her chart is very close to her natal Pluto as well. So it can suggest some dark energy that would be connected in one's death. And sadly, the death was connected with somebody that was involved in a shared resources situation with her. Now, another interesting note on this is that this person that Selena had entrusted with, Yolanda, was apparently very obsessed and fixated with her. Now, in the synastry in the two charts, Yolanda's sun is conjunct Selena's Pluto, so you could see where that obsessive and fixated energy can be. Now, another thing too is in Selena's chart, she also has Uranus in the eighth house, so that could indicate a very unpredictable, unusual death. And the thing about this too is looking at this as well. I thought what was interesting is that um, the ruler of Selena's eighth house in her chart, of course, that's Mercury, because Virgo is on the eighth house cusp, is in Taurus. It's Mercury in Taurus, but was pretty close to her. It makes a conjunction to Selena's sun in Aries. So it kind of tells me that, well, that the thing about this is that a murder could have really affected, tied in death in Selena's life. This was something because you're talking about the ruler of the eighth house, which of course is associated with death and murder, of course. And the thing about, sadly too, what I noticed in this chart as well is that at this point in time, you had the transit Sun in Aries, very close proximity to Selena's natal Chiron, which could of course be about wounds and suffering that could be tied in with one's life and one's vitality. And the thing about this too is also looking at the chart now. She also, Selena, sadly also had Mars in the 12th house of endings. And the thing about this is when you have Mars in the 12th house of endings, sometimes it could be an ending that can be rather volatile. It might be, I mean, being in Capricorn tied into one's career. So that is one way this could have manifested with her. And the thing about this too is that looking at this as well, she also, Selena also had the ruler of her 12th house in the 3rd house in her chart of short journeys. So sometimes this could indicate some kind of sorrow in connection with maybe with a short journey in this case. And now when Selena went to confront this person, obviously it was believed it was tied into a short journey that was taken at this time. So anyway, and another thing too is when I look at this now, you also, and as far as transits go at this time, Selena had transit Pluto very close, not too far from her natal Neptune at this time. Now this could be an indicator of some kind of death that was tied into to some kind of betrayal. And in this case, betrayal by somebody she entrusted as an employee. And the thing about this too is that looking at this as well, she also in her natal chart, Selena has the ruler of the 11th house conjunct Neptune. So this is an indicator of dealing with deceptive, duplicitous friends or people she may be in some group, club, or organization with. This is another thing too. Looking at this, another thing I wanted to talk about as well. Interesting. There's one very interesting transit that took place at this time. At this time, transit Mars in Leo was in the 6th house of Selena's chart. Well, the bullet did at least pierce the upper back of Selena, which of course could be connected with Leo. And being close to the 7th, I mean in the 6th house, of course, obviously impacting one's health, and from an employee as well, interestingly enough, because the 6th house is connected with employees. Now another thing, I want to shed some other light on this that I noticed in my research on this. A full moon took place on like the March 16th of 1995, which was about 2 weeks before this death and this big confrontation that Selena had with this employee. Now what's significant about this is that when you had the full moon take place, okay, the full moon, of course, being in Virgo, the opposite sign of Pisces, the sun was in Pisces at the time. Now at this time, the transit sun in Pisces was close, very close proximity to Selena's 2nd house of income. That could shine a light on something deceptive or duplicitous or something unclear or nebulous in connection with one's monetary situation, with one's funds. At the same time, full moon being in Virgo, very close to the 8th house of her 8th house cusp of shared resources at this time. And full moons in astrology can be about unveilings and revelations. In this case, it could be about an unveiling, was about unveiling a revelation of frugality in shared resources of somebody taking funds. And I believe she may have known about this well before that, but at this time it might have really illuminated things and really shed some light on those issues for Selena at this time. And the reality, I mean, again, this was a very sad and tragic situation, of course, that took place for Selena. And I think looking at this as well, I mean, you look at this this chart, this energy, and everything that took place at this time. It's just, again, it's just very tragic, and it's a shame because somebody that young had to pass at a relatively young age and had so much going for her. I'm just trying to look at this and see if there's anything else as far as her chart goes that I could maybe shed some light on, but there's really at this point, I mean, I basically hit the main things that I wanted to cover at this point in time. The only other thing was I want to say that during that time, that full moon that in Virgo that took place at or around March 16th, 1995. Um, that transit sun was also conjunct Selena's natal Venus as well. So, I mean, that could have illuminated some light. Again, that reaffirms what I stated before. The fact that it was hitting her second house, near her second house cusp, it was also very close proximity to her natal Venus in Pisces. And sadly, Venus in Pisces, even by itself, can indicate some gullibility in monetary matters and some delusion and confusion. She seemed to idealize this person. And had this person on a pedestal that was handling a lot of these funds that were coming in connection with fans at this time, and really maybe was a little bit too trusting in terms of monetary matters, and sadly her trusting nature in monetary matters was exploited very strongly. So anyway, people, well, that will conclude this YouTube astrological segment for astrology and the murder of Selena Quintanilla. And until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.